Welcome back. On day one of his presidency, Donald Trump signed an executive order which withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. This also comes as big banks, including banks right here in Canada, have withdrawn from something called the Net Zero Initiative. My next guest is Allison Fajans-Turner, a banks and policy engagement lead at the Rainforest Action Network, and she joins us now. Allison, thanks a lot for joining us. There's got to be great disappointment, I guess, if not surprise, at Donald Trump pulling the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement. What are some of the consequences of that decision, according to your group?
Absolutely, and thank you very much for having me on. I wouldn't say surprise. We've known that this was coming for a while. President Trump, in fact, pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement in his first term. And I think it's important to state that the Paris Agreement survived the U.S. pullout during the first Trump administration. The Paris Agreement is designed to withhold or to withstand political turmoil in any one country. And no other country followed the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement the first time around. Let's hope that that's the same this time around. And lots of forces within the U.S., including large U.S. banks, but also U.S. states, U.S. cities, U.S. companies stepped forward to keep the U.S. moving towards its climate goals made under the Paris Agreement the first time around. And they've said that they will do it again this time as well.
So the United States now joins on the sidelines a very small number of countries that are not in the Paris Agreement, correct? What are those countries?
So you mostly have some countries in the Middle East. I believe Iran. I know that Argentina was pulled out a little earlier, just a few months ago. But it is a very small minority of countries. Most countries are still very much committed to the Paris Agreement, and we should see that going forward.
China is in, or is it? And India is in. Is that correct in both cases?
Absolutely.
Are they
Yes,
participating in a meaningful way? Or is China acting significantly to cut its emissions? And same question to India.
Absolutely, they are. In fact, China has the largest investments in clean energy of any country, and has for several years now. So both China and India are very serious about an energy transition towards a clean energy economy. And in fact, what the Trump administration has just done by announcing several actions to try and block the growth of clean energy in the U.S. is ceding the clean energy space and leadership to countries like China and India at the detriment of the U.S. economy.
Okay, let's move to the banking sector. People who watch the business headlines have noticed recently a series of announcements from first big U.S. banks and more recently big Canadian banks here, including Bank of Montreal, National Bank of Canada, which is a private bank not to be confused with the Bank of Canada, Toronto Dominion Bank, CIBC, and Bank of Nova Scotia withdrawing from the Net Zero Banking Alliance. What's going on here?
Well, it's disappointing to see all of these major banks pulling out of the Net Zero Banking Alliance and this voluntary association. It was disappointing to see Canadian banks follow U.S. banks out. It's important to know that these withdrawals are motivated by politics and by legal threats, and these legal threats are they don't have strong legal basis either. They are not motivated by turning one's back on climate commitments. All of these banks, in their exit statements, reasserted that they will stay committed to climate, and they have all made climate goals and targets that are independent of their membership in these voluntary associations. Belonging to the voluntary associations were never the best indicator of bank decarbonization. And so what we ultimately need to see banks doing is decreasing the amount of money they are giving to fossil fuels year on year, halting the amount of money that they are giving to fossil fuel expansion, new fossil fuels, and increasing the amount of money that they are giving in green investments to clean energy.
You referred to threats and threats of lawsuits. Where are those threats coming from?
Those threats are of an antitrust nature, and they are particularly coming from parts of the U.S. Republican Party, including certain committees in Congress. So, particularly the Judiciary Committee.
Do you believe banks can decarbonize their lending portfolios without being part of a group like the Net Zero Banking Alliance?
Absolutely, they can. The Net Zero Banking Alliance never had any enforcement power in the first place. And it will continue to provide guidance to banks whether they are now officially members of the alliance or not. But banks, what banks really need to be doing is engaging with their clients and setting time-bound targets to help those clients transition away from fossil fuels and towards clean energy.